So the chase is very different to the other Dalek serials we've seen so far. We see the return of the Daleks after their defeat during their invasion of Earth, with them pursuing him through time and space, giving the serial a somewhat similar structure to the Keys of Marinus. But beyond the structural change, this serial is also unique for being a comedy, which I'll discuss when the time comes. I'll admit now that I'm not the biggest fan of the chase, with it being a serial where my opinion of it can vary between episodes and quite often scenes. While I do think it's quite a fun watch with plenty of moments which get a chuckle, overall it feels lesser than the two previous Dalek serials. But we'll find out why I think that as I examine this Dalek comedy. So we begin in the TARDIS, where Ian is relaxing with a book, Barbara is busy making a dress, and Vicky is bored and being a nuisance to them both, looking over Ian's shoulder while he's reading before accidentally ruining the dress that Barbara was making, which was for Vicky. Now, while I'm spoiling the end a bit earlier than I usually would, this is the final serial to feature Ian and Barbara, as they both take their leave at the end of the serial. Knowing that, these scenes where we're watching them acting in a relatively normal and relatable way for people who travel through space and time, shows how much they become accustomed to this lifestyle since being kidnapped, which is important for their departure when we understand that they still do want to get home, despite how natural of a lifestyle this is for them now. They are quite blasé about the entire thing, something which comes up a few more times in the serial. The Doctor meanwhile is repairing the machine he was gifted in the previous serial, the machine in question being called a time-space visualizer. This turns out to be a machine which has the capability to view any point in history. Now, before getting into the machine's use in the serial, I want to discuss a bit of its backstory behind the scenes, as its development from script to screen is very interesting. Beginning at the beginning, it was Nation who created the space-time visualizer for his serial, where it was to have been made by the Doctor, who would have compared it to the crystal sets of Ian and Barbara's time. It was script editor Dennis Spooner who changed it so that the Doctor received it as a gift at the end of a previous serial, which does explain why he got something while Vicky did not. The time-space visualizer also had a different name, being called the Visiscope. Design-wise, it was meant to resemble a TV rather than the massive circular machine that we got. Dalek 6388 has a great video on this time television, which I'd highly recommend if you want to learn more about it. Moving back to the plot, the space-time visualizer is used by the quartet so that they can view any point in history which they want, obviously all choosing Earth history. In order, we have Ian wanting to watch the Gettysburg Address in 1863, Barbara wanting to view a meeting between William Shakespeare and Queen Elizabeth I for unknown reasons, then finally we have Vicky wanting to view a performance of the Beatles. The Beatles scene is the most interesting as it acts as both a commentary of how the world will one day be viewed by the future, while also acting as another moment of Vicky calling Barbara old.
Vicky, I had no idea you knew about the Beatles.
I've been to their Memorial Theatre in Liverpool.
What do you think of them, Vicky?
Well, they're marvellous, but I didn't know they played classical music.
Classical music?
Behind the scenes is also interesting as a clip use of the Beatles' performance was recorded for Top of the Pops, and due to junking was for many years the only footage of them on Top of the Pops. We also have the evolution of the scene from script to screen, as at one point it was hoped that the Beatles themselves would have made an appearance, but this was vetoed allegedly due to the intervention of their manager, Brian Epstein. Back to the plot, Ian is dancing as the song ends with the TARDIS soon landing. We get this inventive, interesting and kind of silly shot where the Doctor is using controls, but we're seeing him from the console's view. I don't hate it, but it's really peculiar. So the planet is called Iridius, a planet which was once dominated by vast oceans which were all dried up by its two suns. The quartet split up with the Doctor and Barbara remaining with the ship while Ian and Vicky go to explore. I'm fairly sure that's Canberra. Here we are introduced to the TARDIS magnet, which is a device the Doctor created which directs the user to the TARDIS, something which is so useful it's unlikely to come up again in either this serial or the show as a whole. While Ian and Vicky are busy continuing the plot, the Doctor and Barbara are sunbathing.
What's that awful noise?
Yeah. I beg your pardon, awful noise. Is there a way to talk about my singing?
No, Doctor, not that awful noise. The other one. Listen to it.
As per usual, these two are on point, with the Doctor singing and Barbara calling it an awful noise. The noise Barbara was originally pointing out turns out to be the space-time visualizer which is still on, so she goes to turn it off only to discover the Daleks using their own time-space visualizer to spy on the TARDIS. This allows the Doctor and Barbara to discover that the Daleks are after them with their own time machine, much like the TARDIS. With this information, the two of them go after Ian and Vicky, but are buried by a sandstorm in the process, awakening the next morning to meet with a Dalek. But since the Daleks have already been revealed in both the previous serial and to the cast in this serial, it does somewhat diminish this reveal, as it just seems to be an attempt to repeat the cliffhanger from the Dalek invasion of Earth. During the previous day, Ian and Vicky have stumbled upon an underground city belonging to the inhabitants of the planet, the Iridians, with the specific section they find having been overtaken by creatures called Beast, and so the section is being sealed off, with the use of explosives. Ian is injured during the process, but eventually the quartet are reunited, with the Iridians willing to give them up to the Daleks for their own survival. These plans are ruined by the arrival of a Maya beast which breaks through from a sealed off section, giving the quartet an opportunity to escape. With the Daleks surrounding the TARDIS, the quartet come up with a plan to outwit the one on guard, an easy task given the Daleks in this serial, who have already shown themselves to be less than smart.
We will take some Iridians prisoner. Yes. And use them to dig the ship free. Yes. We'll see to it.
The trap consists of ruining another of Barbara's sweaters by using it and the Doctor's coat to cover the edge of the pit, before we get this brilliant scene.
Oh, Dalek! Over here, Fred! Oh, Archie!
Oi!
Over here!
Try and get out of that hole, Fred.
This is glorious. With the quartet having escaped from Iridius, they spend the next few episodes making several short stops while being pursued by the Daleks. The first stop is at the top of the Empire State Building in New York City, 1966, which was still in the future during broadcast. Here we meet comedy character Morton Dill, played by one Peter Purvis. Despite the very wild accent, he's quite fun as he tries to rationalise the TARDIS and the quartet, thinking they're from Hollywood. His opening interactions with Barbara and Vicky are good.
Morning.
Not from Earth.
No, ma'am. No, I'm from Alabama.
What time is this?
3 after 12, ma'am.
I really meant, what year is this?
What, you mean you have different years here?
What year is it in Alabama?
1966, ma'am.
Afternoon?
Morning. 1966.
Oh, thank you.
Place to oblige you, ma'am.
Then once the quartet leave, we get his encounter with a Dalek, who he also believes to be a creation of Hollywood. The way the Dalek reacts to him kind of makes me feel bad for the Dalek, who just doesn't know how to cope with someone from Alabama, escaping the situation as soon as it possibly can. Now, I don't tend to go into the expanded media or the novelisations of these serials, as these reviews are focused on the serial itself, but I will in the case of Morton Dill, as it's quite interesting. So despite having all good reason to, the Dalek doesn't kill Morton Dill, with it being explained in the novelisation that Morton Dill was locked up at the Newman Rehabilitation Clinic the following year as a permanent resident. This being the plan of the Dalek, due to it being a far worse fate than death. Something tells me either the writer John Peel saw an opportunity for an interesting idea, or just really didn't like Morton Dill. Returning to the quartet, their next landing is on a sailing ship, where they get into a lot more trouble as Barbara is believed to be a stowaway by the crew. Events lead to Ian getting hit over the head by Vicky as they attempt to escape, but manage to get out of there before the Daleks catch up with them. This of course leaves the crew of the ship at the Daleks' mercy, which is something they lack. In the panic, the entire crew and all the passengers abandon ship, notably including a woman with her baby, which given what fate they will meet is pretty dark given this is a kids show. A Dalek does attempt to follow them. Then after a line which I think is meant to be humorous with the Daleks speaking in unison,
There is no one on the vessel.
they leave the ship, which is revealed to be the Mary Celeste. This is quite an interesting idea for Nation, using time travel to explain unexplainable mysteries. From there, the TARDIS lands in a place with a very confusing on-screen depiction but an equally interesting behind-the-scenes origin. So in the serial, the haunted house is an attraction in a theme park in the year 1996, but the original idea was for the haunted house to be in a world created by the imagination of humans. This idea would have been a first for the show, taking it in a different direction from the usual sci-fi, but producer Verity Lambert wasn't keen and had the plot changed by script editor Dennis Spooner. But these rewrites didn't cover the entire thing, and so while the reason was changed to a theme park, the dialogue where the Doctor deduces that they are in a land of imagination is left in. Because of this decision, the haunted house section is quite strange to watch. We have the Doctor saying,
Precondition.
What are you talking about now?
This house is exactly what you would expect in a nightmare. But in a world of dreams.
With one vital difference, Doctor. This house is real. It exists.
In the dark recesses of the human minds, millions of people secretly believing. Think of the immense power of all these people combined together. Makes this place become a reality.
But then we've got a robotic Dracula which seems to be breaking down. This just doesn't work together. To expand this contradictory nature, there is a discussion when Ian and the Doctor both believe the Daleks can never enter this world due to it being a world of fantasy, which the Daleks do moments later, but neither of them are shocked by this. Beyond the overall oddity of the haunted house section, there isn't much to say. Outside of a few technical problems, most notably the camera cutting too early to Vicky and so she's frozen for a moment, awaiting her cue. Oh, and of course another Dalek meeting its fate at the hands of Frankenstein's monster, so that's one Dalek destroyed by the Doctor and Ian, then another two by outside elements. At least this one wasn't acting like an idiot. Fun fact, these three Dalek props are all the same prop. A new Dalek made by Shawcraft as a stunt Dalek of sorts, being lighter than the others so it could be used for the location filming, when proving perfect for these sort of scenes in studio. And while I'm talking about fun Dalek prop facts, this serial features 3 which were made for the Dalek movie, Doctor Who and the Daleks. meaning that they debuted on screen in the show before their movie appearance, plus don't actually do anything other than make Dalek spotters scratch their heads of their oddities. Back to the plot. The Doctor, Ian and Barbara have reunited in the TARDIS, accidentally leaving Vicky behind, forcing her to sneak aboard the Dalek time machine. Here we get another of the serial's interesting but poorly executed ideas, this being the Robot Doctor. So to explain the purpose of the Robot Doctor in the story, the Daleks created it using their knowledge of the Doctor in order to trick his companions and kill them. Now this is definitely an interesting idea, having a fake Doctor which the audience knows about but doesn't know who is who. It's certainly a great way to increase the tension going into episode 5. There's just one small problem. That being, since the show was recorded live, it means that Hartnell cannot play both characters in all the scenes they both appear. This means that another actor was necessary, this being Edward Warwick, who doesn't look anything like Hartnell. So these problems go all the way back to Nation writing it into the script and Spooner not writing it out, or anyone saying this won't work until it was too late. Hartnell does provide the voice of the Robot Doctor with the lines being dubbed over, but the syncing isn't amazing, and with him not looking like Hartnell, you're not fooled. Although I am an adult saying this, so I don't know if it fools kids, especially back on broadcast. Hartnell does sometimes play the Robot Doctor, but it doesn't work. In fact, the scene where the Robot Doctor is first revealed, it kind of feels like it was written to be self-aware of these flaws, as the Dalek dialogue seems a bit too on the nose.
Then we're safe.
Safe? What on earth do you mean, dear boy?
But the Daleks can't touch us here. Not in the human mind.
You know, I believe you're right. The Daleks can never land here.
I should move back to the plot now, but I do want to say one final thing about the Robot Doctor. Due to the wig and makeup, the Robot Doctor always looks like Odo from Star Trek DS9 to me. I'm probably the only one, but I can't unsee it now. So anyway, the plot. With Vicky missing, the rest of the quartet come up with a plan to defeat the Daleks and take their time machine to go back for her, with the next place they land being their final battleground. I do want to say that as this is Ian and Barbara's final story, I do think it's great that the remains of the original TARDIS quartet become separated from Vicky, so we get to see the unique dynamic which we only got a chance to see at the start of the rescue. They don't spend too long as this trio, but it's great to see it one last time. The TARDIS arrives on the planet Mechanus, where the trio immediately meet the Fungoids. They find a defensive location where they prepare for the final battle. The Daleks arrive with Vicky going to find the others so she can warn them, but by the time she reaches them, the Robot Doctor has already begun to make its move, with it nearly killing Barbara. This leads to a confrontation between the Doctor and the Robot Doctor, which leads to the Robot Doctor telling Ian to kill the Doctor by...
Objected to it. Now's your chance. Destroy it. Destroy it with a rock.
Things work out at the last minute as the Robot Doctor calls Vicky Susan, which shows it's the fake, allowing the Doctor to disable it by removing its power unit. With the Robot Doctor defeated and the quartet reunited, they return to their hiding place where they rest for the night as they prepare for the Daleks. As they sleep, a strange machine passes over them and watches them. The following day they are found by the Daleks, leaving them with no choice but to use the Doctor's bomb. But as the Doctor prepares to use it, a wall opens up to reveal a mechanoid. So the mechanoids were a race of robots which were sent to the planet to prepare for colonisation. The colonisation never happened and the machines made the planet their own. Originally known as the Mechons in Nation's original script, this was changed by producer Verity Lambert due to her reading of the word being similar to that of the Mekon, the enemy of Dandare. Because of this, the name was changed to help them stand out. But due to this, over the years, there have been many problems with the spelling of this word, with the original name of Mekon surviving in one line of Dalek dialogue.
The Mechons have forced us to take action.
There are also changes to their backstory, with them being a second generation of robots built by the original robots. The details which Nation included were too similar to the abandoned script The Masters of Luxor, and so it was changed to the Mechanoids, being hostile to anyone not knowing their code. With that only somewhat important backstory noted, moving back to the plot, the quartet are captured by the Mechanoids who imprison them with their other captive, Stephen Taylor, played by Peter Purvis. We learn that Stephen crashed on the planet where he was captured by the Mechanoids who have been holding him for 2 years. During these years, he has made a wooden structure which leads up to the roof, allowing him to stand in the fresh air but doesn't allow him any chance of escape. We also learn that he's not been alone all these years, having the company of a toy panda named Hi-Fi, who is his mascot. Now Stephen I'll discuss more in his coming stories as he becomes a companion, but I think he's got a strong introduction, which doesn't present him as a companion and just a person who the quartet will help or get killed. This lack of a clear setup for him becoming a companion really strengthens his character as we go in with expectations which are subverted. Whether this is intentional or not, I don't know. It could be that Stephen was a character created by Nation who just became a companion later on, but I can't confirm that, but I'm inclined to say that I've heard it somewhere. So with the quartet captives of the Mechanoids, the Daleks begin their attack to kill them. While this invasion occurs, the quartet manage to figure out an escape plan by using a lengthy cable on the top of the roof to climb down. The cable was attached to machinery so Stephen was unable to remove it alone, hence why he never escaped with it. Now this escape scene is great, with the tension being high as we have both the Daleks closing in on the quartet while the Mechanoids repel them, leading to a full-scale battle. One Dalek makes it to the cell but is destroyed by the Doctor's explosive. Seemingly this is what causes the fire which destroys the Mechanoid city. With no way back, the quartet have no choice choice but to rappel themselves down, but they discover that Vicky is scared of heights and so must be blindfolded and lowered down by the others. As she is being lowered, Stephen realises he's left Hi-Fi and so goes back for him. This causes Ian to try and stop him, which causes him to let go of the cable, nearly leading to the strangulation of Barbara as it pulls her off, with the Doctor pulled to the ground by the weight. Fortunately, they were able to recover from this, with Barbara being saved by the Doctor and Ian, allowing them to finally escape, leaving the Daleks and the Mechanoids to fight in the burning city. With the Daleks defeated, Ian and Barbara tell the Doctor that they want to use the Dalek time machine to return home, and this is a powerful scene. The Doctor is completely against it because of the risks involved. While this is the end of Ian and Barbara's story, it's an important moment in the Doctor's. Unlike when he left Susan on Earth, this time his companions, his friends, are choosing to leave him in a potentially dangerous way, and he doesn't want them to get hurt. He's grown from the man who would kill them to protect himself, to a man who isn't willing to let his friends go when there's a chance they won't make it. With the help of Vicky, Ian and Barbara are able to convince the Doctor to help them, giving them a 50-50 shot at making the trip successfully. With this, the quartet separate, saying their goodbyes before Ian and Barbara take the risk to get back home. The risk pays off as they return to Earth in 1965.
London 1965!
They say a final goodbye before we get this nice montage of shots to enjoying being back in London after 2 long years of travelling the universe. The final scene of them together on a bus showing their complete lack of knowledge of how the world has changed, laughing in joy. A bittersweet ending. One final shot of the Doctor and Vicky watching their 2 friends on the space-time visualiser. Vicky is ecstatic that the 2 managed to get home, while the Doctor is clearly saddened by their departure.
I shall miss them. Yes, I shall miss them. City of Fuspots. Come along, my dear. It's time we were off.
It's clear that Hartnell is showing through the Doctor, his own sadness that they're leaving the show coming through into the Doctor's own. The Chase is an interesting serial, pushing comedy with the Daleks in a way which clashes with their previously established nature. Now there are certainly a great number of funny moments throughout. The scene where the Doctor and Ian trick the Dalek in episode 2 is great, plus I do really enjoy Morton Dill as he's just so over the top he becomes funny. But for the most part I think it's out of place. The Daleks lose their edge, becoming quite stupid in several instances, perhaps most notably in the Mary Celeste scene, and 2 scenes in the Dalek time machine where a Dalek struggles to do a calculation.
How long before we reach them? In Earth time, 4 minutes.
Nation is a great comedy writer. I really enjoy his episodes of The Persuaders, plus Doctor Who can be a very funny show both in general episodes or full-on comedies like The Romans. But I think the way Nation tried to make a comedy Dalek serial didn't work as intended, at least for me, with it mostly being a sometimes irritating watch which doesn't stick with me like other Dalek serials. It's certainly not the worst Dalek serial, with its multiple locations making it very interesting, plus the writing aid for 2 of the original quartet makes it memorable. I do want to discuss one final thing though, unrelated to the plot. This is to do with the way the serial presents the Doctor in terms of what he is. Now at this time in the series, it had not been confirmed if the Doctor was an alien. While yes, that was the prevailing opinion of the character, nobody had ever directly said he was an alien or otherwise. But this serial does seem to potentially suggest human origins. The notable line of this was cut. Cast your mind back to the start of this review when I was discussing the origins of the space-time visualiser. It's changed from script to screen. The Doctor was to have originally made the device, comparing it to crystal sets made by children in Ian and Barbara's time. The fact that he describes it as their time suggests he's from the future, whether that be Earth or potentially a human colony in the future, with the latter being more likely. The origins of the Doctor do come up again in the next serial, so I'll discuss it further there, but I wanted to note this fact. The TARDIS also gets a bit of backstory with the time path detector, which the Doctor describes as,
That's my time path detector. It's been in the ship ever since I constructed it.
Now while the Doctor could be referring to the time path detector itself here, the way the line is phrased does potentially indicate that the Doctor is referring to the ship itself, meaning that the Doctor is saying he himself built the TARDIS. Admittedly, this does hold less weight than the potential human origins, given what we know from earlier serials, but it's an interesting thing. One final thing, we are introduced to the time rotor.
Doctor, look, the time rotor.
Now it's very clear that Vicky is indicating to a panel and not the central column, meaning that the time rotor is something completely different to the central column. Later canon may have changed this, but I stand by it being something different as it's never been directly called the time rotor on screen. The Chase was an experiment which I don't think really worked. I don't really enjoy it, but if you do, then I can understand why. It's got plenty of interesting ideas and lore implications, plus the departure of 2 incredible companions. It's not topping A list for me, but it's still better than the 2 dual serials which the series has given us so far. But next time, the TARDIS lands in 1066 as the Vikings are about to begin their invasion, but this seemingly historical setting is hiding something as a strange monk is meddling in ways no human could. Next time, the Time Meddler.